There are names that never fade inside us, faces that time does not erase, memories that return without being invited, not as nostalgia, but as presence. Why do they return even after we've said goodbye? What if thinking about them isn't madness or weakness, but a message? Jung once taught us that once a person becomes emotionally charged within us, they stop being just a memory. They become an inner figure, alive, acting in the unconscious, not to torment, but to reveal. And Neville Goddard added a key to this mystery. Imagination is not fantasy, but a spiritual faculty. What we revisit in thought is not just thought. It's a sacred field where our soul recreates, reorders, and communicates. So, if someone keeps appearing in your mind, maybe it's not because you haven't moved on, but because a part of you hasn't been heard. Maybe the thought is not obsession, but echo, not fixation, but a fragment of your soul calling for closure, reunion, or rebirth. In this video, I won't ask you to forget. I'll ask you to listen, to sit with the image, to let the silence speak, because sometimes what returns is not them, but the part of you that stayed with them. Shall we begin? There are thoughts that don't ask permission. They slip into the silence of the day. They whisper at night. You think you've moved on, but they appear again. Not in the flesh, but in memory. And that's where it hurts the most. Jung taught that what we repress does not die. It changes form. What was left unresolved does not disappear, and it returns. In dreams, in images, in sudden waves of memory that pull us inward. Maybe what keeps coming back is not them, but the version of you that you abandoned during the connection. The one who silenced herself to be accepted, the one who hid her truth to avoid loss, the one who wasn't ready to let go but had no choice. And now, this self haunts you. But this is not punishment, it's reunion. What returns is the echo of a self that was never heard. Neville Goddard reminds us that imagination is not escape, it's encounter. What you see in your mind is not just memory. It's the soul inviting you back to where you left yourself behind. So if they appear, don't ask, why can't I forget them? Ask, what part of me went silent with their goodbye? Because sometimes what repeats in thought is the voice of the self that was split off, waiting to be brought home. There's a phrase often repeated when someone lingers in our heart: let go. As if release were a button, as if forgetting were a virtue. But the soul does not function on command. It doesn't close chapters that were never read in full. To silence a feeling before listening to it is to abandon the part of us still asking for meaning. Letting go when imposed too soon becomes another form of amputation, a spiritual bypass. We tear out the connection without decoding its message. Neville Goddard once said, "To imagine is to enter the sacred." And in that sacred space, a missing conversation can be lived again, not to dwell, but to understand. Sometimes, imagining the dialogue you never had isn't delusion, it's ritual. It's a symbolic act of healing in a space where time bends and the soul listens. You were told to forget, but maybe your soul is asking for remembrance. Not to go back, but to recover the truth that stayed behind. Letting go only heals when it follows deep understanding. Otherwise, it's not release. It's spiritual silence disguised as strength. Not all loves come to stay. Some arrive as storms, not to destroy, but to awaken. They enter quietly, then unsettle everything. And when they leave, they take nothing, yet everything feels changed. What if they weren't meant to be your future, but your mirror? Jung taught that archetypes wear human faces. They disguise themselves as people we long for, but what they truly touch is the dormant self beneath our skin. Maybe they weren't your person. They were your passage. Their gaze showed you a version of yourself you had never seen. Their presence stirred energies you didn't know lived in you, and their absence left a wound, not just from loss, but from unfinished transformation. Neville Goddard reminds us, what we see in others often reveals what we have yet to embrace within. So the love that didn't become relationship may still be sacred, because it revealed something sacred in you. They were never the destination. They were the turning point. And even now, when their memory returns, it may not be asking to be recovered, but to be reinterpreted. There is a quiet suffering that grows when we try to silence what still echoes within. A thought pushed aside returns sharper. A name avoided becomes a pulse in the chest. What the soul tries to express does not disappear through logic. It transforms into anxiety, into fatigue, into a loop of thoughts that seem meaningless, but carry the weight of an unspoken truth. Jung reminded us, the psyche never forgets what it hasn't understood, and when meaning is denied, the image intensifies. The one you think about constantly may not be a person anymore, but a symbol of a moment that fractured something inside you, of a truth that never found language, of a goodbye that never became closure. To name this isn't to explain it away. It's to make space, to stop fearing the return of the image and begin to listen to what it holds. Neville Goddard spoke of the power of inner dialogue, of treating the image as sacred, as if the person were a dream symbol, not to fix the past, but to allow it to speak. Ask not, why can't I forget him? But what part of me still lives in the memory of him? Because every thought you suppress returns as an echo, and every echo ignored becomes a wound you carry without knowing. There are partings that happen in reality, but never reach the soul. Goodbyes that were never spoken remain suspended, like unfinished songs echoing through dreams. She dreamed of him often, not as he was, but as something softer. He would appear in a dim light, whispering words she never heard when he was present. And in one of those dreams, he finally said, I was never meant to stay, only to awaken you. She woke up not in tears, but in stillness, as if something had finally settled inside. What her mind couldn't explain, her dream revealed. He was never the ending. He was the door. Jung taught that dreams are the voice of the unconscious. They use symbols when words fail. They offer release when reality has denied it. And Neville Goddard would say, even imagined encounters, if felt deeply, can transform inner landscapes. Because imagination, when lived with soul, reshapes the very fabric of our being. After the dream, she didn't stop thinking of him, but the thought changed. It softened. It lost its urgency, its ache. Not because the bond was broken, but because something deeper had been completed. When a goodbye finds its symbolic voice, the soul exhales. There are ruptures that happen suddenly, but inside us, they remain unfinished. Words that were never spoken, explanations that dissolved into silence, emotions that had no place to land. We may say, I've moved on, but a part of us didn't. It stayed behind. In that room, in that look, in that moment that still replays like a scene waiting for its final line. Jung spoke of the psyche as a circle seeking completion. What is not integrated returns, not to torment, but to be made whole. The thoughts that revisit you may be fragments of that open loop, asking not for reconciliation with the other, but with yourself. And Neville Goddard offers a sacred tool, symbolic closure, not by erasing the past, but by entering it differently, writing unsent letters, whispering the truth into the silence of your room, imagining the goodbye that never came. Not to pretend, but to complete the cycle that your soul still walks in circles around, because until you give shape to what was left suspended, a part of you remains there, waiting. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Sometimes the person we can't stop thinking about is not just a memory, but a mirror. They awaken not just longing, but parts of ourselves we were afraid to live. There's something about them, a freedom, a passion, a chaos that both draws and unsettles. Jung called this the shadow, the hidden self, the unlived life, the intensity we deny in order to belong, to survive, to be loved. And when someone comes carrying the energy we lack, we mistake it for fate. But maybe It's not destiny calling, it's our own depth. Neville Goddard would say, "What we desire in others is often what we have yet to claim within." We fall in love with who they make us feel we could be. We become intoxicated by the possibility of a self we've never dared to embody. So maybe the obsession isn't about them. It's about the version of you they touched. The bold one, the wild one, the one who said yes to feeling. When their image returns, it might not be them calling. It might be your shadow, asking not to be feared but to be remembered. Forgetting is not a soul function. It belongs to the mind that tries to erase what it cannot name. But the soul remembers, not to hold on, but to make whole. You were told that to move on, you had to let go. But maybe what your soul wants is not erasure, but meaning. Jung said the soul speaks in images, and Neville Goddard reminded us that even what is imagined can be transfigured. A memory that returns is not always a trap. It can be an opening, a sacred wound, still speaking in symbols. Repetition is not punishment, it is a call to completion, to meet again the moment that split you, but this time with consciousness. The thought that returns is not weakness, it is the soul saying, there is something here still waiting to be lived, not outside, but within. Integration is not forgetting. It is seeing the memory without collapsing into it. It is holding the name without breaking, because when you understand what they meant, not who they were, but what they revealed, you no longer need to banish their image. You transform it. You weave it into your story. You let it become a quiet part of your becoming. Some memories don't ask for closure. They ask for reverence, because what stays is not the person, but the part of you that met itself through them. You were never weak for remembering. You were listening to a soul that speaks not through logic, but through return, through echo, through that silent ache that has always meant more than pain. They were not just someone you loved. They were a portal, a mirror, a question. And now, what comes back is not a demand to revisit the past, but an invitation to reclaim what was left there. A voice that went unheard, a truth that was silenced, a self that froze in the moment of rupture. As Jung taught us, the unconscious will keep calling until the symbol is understood. And as Neville whispered through his teachings, imagination is sacred because it allows us to revisit not just events, but meanings, to transform what once wounded into something that now awakens. So if their image returns, don't push it away. Sit with it. Let the silence speak beneath the name. There may be something within that memory still waiting to be retrieved. Not them, but you. And if your heart has carried this far, if you've walked through these words and felt yourself reflected, then you are not alone. Very few dare to look at what you're feeling. But here, you are seen. If you made it this far, comment "Estoy despierta," and let us walk this journey of memory and meaning together. The next video awaits. But for now, let this silence echo. Let it become a beginning.